The first and most important thing for any attraction, whether it is a haunted attraction, whether it's a Christmas event, whether it is a stage show, is what's the story you're telling? What is your story? Because without a story, it's not a haunted attraction, it's a showroom floor. So you just, throw a bunch of crap out there and hope that it works. I don't like that personally. So I want to try to find a way to refine the story so that we have a backbone to help us make decisions throughout the attraction.
Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Matt, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little scared.
Why are you scared?
I just have this recurring nightmare from this haunted house I went through more than 10 years ago. And just thinking about it right now.
Okay. What was the haunted house?
Well, if I recall correctly, which I do, it was called Alone, and it was at Howlow Scream at Busch Gardens. And I paid money. I paid $40 to go through a haunted house all by myself. And, it's just given me nightmares every night since then.
Well, that's fantastic. Or should I say fantastic, right? Yeah. It's good that you were able to emotionally connect with that experience. But why is that experience on your mind today?
Well, the reason for that is because we've got an amazing interview, an amazing story that we're going to hear from Scott Swenson, whose company is Scott Swenson Creative Development, LLC. And we're going to talk all about the process of creating a story, particularly in theme parks, in attractions, that create that better emotional connection with your guests.
What I think is really interesting to hear him talk about story is that, yes, it's about the story that the guest experiences, but it's also about how the facility puts that story together, right? And I think he said it was the backbone of all the decisions that you need to make from a creative standpoint and how people experience your attraction, and it kind of keeps you on brand. So I'm really excited to hear more about that and how that actually shapes the experience that people ultimately have, whether they get the whole story or not.
Right, exactly. The emotional connection that they get with it. And I know that we used a haunted house as an example right there, but that's just one example of course, the stories that we tell to our guests in attractions. And it could be horror, it could be comedy, it could be a more emotional connection with it, as long as we're telling a story and sparking some feelings from it.
Absolutely. So once upon a time, we had Scott Swenson on the podcast, and this is how it went.
Scott Swenson from Scott Swenson Creative Development, LLC. What a coincidence. Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so glad I was able to buy the company because it just happened to have my name on it. I thought that worked out really well.
So Scott, tell us a little bit about the company and also your background in the industry.
Oh gosh, that could be a very long discussion. I'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible, which I'm sure you will learn very quickly is difficult for me, but I'll do the best I can. So I've been in the theme park / attractions industry for a little over 25 years. And I started late in life getting into theme park. I started in entertainment as an actor, director, starving artist kind of thing. And then I got involved with theme park because it was actually a steady gig. And I worked at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg as a performer, then came to Busch Gardens in Tampa as also as a performer, and then worked my way up to become the director of entertainment there. And I was at Busch Gardens in Tampa for 21 years. And then magically my position disappeared one morning when I came into work. And I panicked for about 10 minutes and then I realized, you know what, I've got this incredible skill set and this great Rolodex of people that I know, you know, a contact list longer than my arm. Why don't I see what happens if I go out on my own? And it was perhaps the best thing that ever happened to me. I often refer to the day that my position was eliminated as the day I got promoted, because I stopped working for somebody else and I started working for myself. And within the first week, I had my first client. And a month later, I was on a cruise ship in Europe installing shows for Viking. Since then, I've gone on to work for clients like Fort Edmonton Park in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Space Center Houston, the Florida Aquarium, Zoo Tampa, Maurice Pier. I just keep finding these wonderful people that I get to work with, and I've got a bunch of new projects that are in the works right now. But the nice thing is, as an independent contractor, you know, I work as a consultant, and I get to do all the stuff I loved to do as the director of entertainment, and none of the stuff I didn't. So, you know, I don't have to worry about payroll because it's just me. I don't have to worry about, you know, am I keeping my clients happy? That's just part of the gig. But I get to focus. I don't have to worry about disciplinary action. You know, the only person I can discipline is myself. My HR department is really small. You know, as long as I don't offend me, I'm okay. So I like I said, I get to do all the things I love in an industry that I have come to love, respect, sometimes fear. And it's just been the best way to find the perfect work-life balance for me, and to continue to do what I love to do.
That's awesome. I love how you said you got promoted, you know, when you actually lost that job. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your company does, and, you know, what kind of productions or things that we might see, you know, when we go to Maurice Piers, or we go to Zoo Tampa, what will we see that has got your stamp on it?
So I, for the last couple of years, I've been the creative director for Creatures of the Night and Christmas in the Wild at Zoo Tampa. I was the creative director and writer for an immersive Halloween event at the Vault Tampa, called the Vault of Souls, which was a very high-end, elegant, immersive theater piece that happened to be Halloween based. I have, what else have I done? I've written a couple show concepts for Legoland. I've written a couple show concepts for Maurice Pier was an interesting one. They just had me come out and do a complete evaluation of their ghost ship. And I did a written evaluation for them, and hopefully, knock wood, I'll be back. I'll be back again to do some other stuff. Right now, I'm in the process of working on a 5-year plan for events through B. Morrow Productions. I've sort of co-opted with a larger production company. And I'm the creative director for their 5-year plan for their spring, fall, and winter events. I'm also kind of doing the same thing for Franklin Institute up in Philly. And I guess that's about, let's see, what else have I got going on? Zoo Tampa. Oh, and a couple projects that will be announced very shortly. One in Las Vegas and one in California.
Very cool. Very cool. I want to dive a little deeper onto the ghost ship thing, because I've been through that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious from your standpoint, when you go through and evaluate that, and we don't have to talk specifically about ghost ship, but other haunts, what are those things that you're looking for that can be improved, or, you know, the show elements, or just kind of walk us through your process there?
Sure. The first and most important thing for any attraction, whether it is a haunted attraction, whether it's a Christmas event, whether it is a stage show, is what's the story you're telling? What is your story? Because without a story, it's not a haunted attraction, it's a showroom floor. So you just, you know, throw a bunch of crap out there and hope that it works. I don't like that personally. So I want to try to find a way to refine the story so that we have a backbone to help us make decisions throughout the attraction. Once you've got that storyline hooked up, once you know you have to go from A to B to C to D, it makes all your other decisions much simpler. It gives you guide rails. Now you can go off the rails at times and then decide, well, how do we change the story to make this happen? Because it's so very important that we buy this one animation or that we hire 15 different actors or whatever. But I like to create or refine the story first. Then I like to figure out what are the beats within the story, and that becomes the different rooms, scenes, vignettes. On a larger scale event, that becomes the different elements of culinary, entertainment, merchandise. How do they all connect to our overarching story theme? And then I love it's the middle part that I always get frustrated with, because I love the minutia. I love going back and finding those little details that's going to take it from that's good to wow, that's amazing. And sometimes those tipping points aren't the big expensive thing that you think they are. They're a form of customer service that wasn't anticipated. They're instead of, like in a haunted attraction, for example, I did some work for a haunted attraction in Tampa called Undead in the Water, which takes place on the American Victory ship. And we actually operated in 2020 during the pandemic. And yes, everybody wore masks and we physically distanced and we redid all of the scares so that they were either separated or masked or whatever. But one of the things that people talked about the most was the fact that we cleverly found a way to work in hand sanitizer to the story. So I know it's like, what? But what we were able to do is the idea behind the story, behind the experience for years has been this ship, which is a real floating vessel. It's a World War II cargo vessel, was originally. And this ship is, within our mythology, the last way to escape the city of Tampa during the zombie apocalypse. And so we've morphed this story to kind of serialize it, just like they do with horror films. This was year 3. And we decided before the pandemic that this was going to be the year that they were actually using the ship for research purposes to try to cure the zombie apocalypse, because it's a spore-based, it's spread via spores, not via germs or a virus. And so they were going to be doing these horrible sort of island of Dr. Moreau experiments on these zombies in the ship. And we thought, well, that when the pandemic started, we had the discussion, gosh, do we want to keep this storyline, or is this too close to home? And the owners very bravely said, let's keep it. Let's go down that route. And so we had to incorporate all of the safety procedures into the story. So before guests got on the ship, there was a scientist there who would have to test them to see if they'd been infected with the zombie spore. And this was a topical application where you put it on their hands. If you rub them together and they turned blue, then it meant that they had been infected. And of course, we were lucky. None of our guests had been infected, but that was hand sanitizer. Yeah. And then during the course of the experience, you learn that there is a cure, but the doctor who has it has gone missing. And as you leave the ship, lo and behold, the doctor is there. You get your big grand finale to a story, and she has you all take the cure for the zombie plague, which you put your hands into this machine and it lights up and it sprays some sort of liquid on your hands and you rub it together, and lo and behold, we've just sanitized your hands as you leave as well. So we found ways to incorporate those kinds of quirkiness into the story. And I like those kinds of details that elevate you above the norm. They take you out of one of my mentors, a brilliant woman who unfortunately is no longer with us. Her name is Lane College. She was the vice president of entertainment when I started at Busch Gardens. And she once said the difference between a good show and a great show is attention to detail. So I always try to find that moment in the process to suggest those elements that will elevate it from good to great.
I love that example that you gave of just the hand sanitizer just not being an added component of, hey, just make sure your hands are clean before going into the zombie apocalypse attraction. It's all just woven in. And like you said, part of that story. And when I think of stories, I really think of heavily themed attractions like the examples that you just gave. But does every attraction need to have a story? If I think of maybe a more traditional amusement park where you're going there to ride rides, or maybe the question is, does every attraction have a story and it's just told in different ways? If there's a certain ride that doesn't have any actual theme to it, but it has a great paint scheme and it's, well maintained and there's landscaping around it and the staff members are friendly, is that the story, even if maybe the guest doesn't realize that they're part of a story?
Well, the way I like to answer it, because I've been asked that question a lot, and especially in the haunted attraction industry with independent haunters, because they're like, I just think it's cool to put scary stuff out there. My answer to that is, if you don't have a story, or let's replace the word story with overarching brand. Okay, because that's really what a story does. The story is what makes your brand cohesive. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a linear A to B to C to D story, because I've done a lot of immersive things that aren't linear, but they still have a story, they still have a background, they still have a history. Without that cohesiveness, without that story or that brand, you have a bunch of little things. When you take that story and find a way to put them all together, you have one giant thing that's made up of a bunch of little things. Mm-hmm. So it makes it more impactful, in my opinion. It makes it stronger. I mean, we talk about theme parks, and we talk about the heavy hitters in the theme park industry. Disney doesn't do anything without a story, whether it's an IP. I mean, we all know that there's like the Main Street USA in Magic Kingdom or Disneyland that has a full backstory, and that story is used to help them make decisions as they go forward. So is it 100% necessary? No. Does it make the quality of the experience better? I believe it does. And even if that story is something as basic as this carnival of really cool rides set itself up here and is loaded with the friendly, happy family that runs it. There's Kennywood, it's, so I think that the story, and I think people get caught up on when I say story, does it have to be this novel? No. Some of the best stories are short, sweet, direct, compelling. So I think if you take the word story and equate it with brand, then yes, everything does need to have a story. And if it doesn't, it could be better if you added one.
Scott, do you see facilities that may not typically have a told story trying to come up with one, or trying to embrace what their authentic story is to tell that to their guests? And I'm thinking specifically of zoological attractions. I've worked with a lot of zoos and aquariums, and yes, their story is conservation. Their message is about the environment. Their message is about the animals. And I think sometimes that doesn't come across as well as maybe they would like to, or maybe as well as it could if they were a little bit more deliberate about the story. And that's just maybe my impression as an outsider. So I'd love to hear your impression of that with all kinds of different attractions.
Well, let's start with zoos and aquariums. I think what's happening now, I think you're right, but I think what's happening now is more and more zoos and aquariums are starting to adapt more of a theme park mentality. They're there to say, let's take these guests on a journey. Let's take them through a story. And one of the most successful aquariums that I'm aware of, and I haven't been to all of them, they also are a client of mine, but when they built the aquarium, the actual architecture tells a story. Mm-hmm. It's the Florida Aquarium, and it's the story of a drop of water from aquifers to open ocean. So you go up the escalators, you start in the aquifers, and then you go out into the wetlands and the swamps, and then you go into the bays and beaches, and then you go out into the open ocean. So, and what that story does is it is truly edutainment, because you don't realize it, but you're starting to recognize, okay, these are all the different habitats or biomes, and I'm probably using that word incorrectly, but these are all the different habitats that fall within the state of Florida. And here's how they all connect into one big story. So it's not a bunch of little habitats. It's one big story. And you learn how each of those segments kind of plays into that one big story. Mm-hmm. I think more and more educational facilities, museums are starting to do this more and more. are starting to embrace the art of storytelling, because I think they're starting to look at the studies that were done years and years ago, which basically say, if you want somebody to remember you, share your information in the form of a story. There's something that happens in your brain, something that happens neurologically when people recognize a story format, which is beginning, middle, and end, and it has a rising action, it has a climax, it has falling action, and some sort of moral at the end. We retain information better. We're hardwired that way as human beings. That goes back to the caveman days when we had to explain how to find food. Instead of just giving a list, if we could tell a story, we'd remember it longer. So, and I think more and more organizations are starting to incorporate that. And I think they're embracing it and recognizing, this is a cheap, cost-effective way to make our brand, make our message stickier. So it stays in people's heads longer.
Yeah.
What are some of the best ways to get that story from, even from the abstract, the written form, and deciding this is what the story is, through the implementation down to the most passive visitor who has no expectation that they're going to be told a story? You give the example of Florida Aquarium being the drop of water and all the different ecosystems coming together. You said, Main Street, in Magic Kingdom or at Disneyland has that whole huge backstory behind it. Most people are walking in, they say, I smell something fried, I want a funnel cake, and I want a picture with the castle, and they're going to absorb such a small amount of it. For me, I think the example that I think of is walking through a haunted house. I'm the kind of guy who, I kind of see this as like my form of art appreciation. I'll walk through slowly, like eyes wide open. I want to see like that coffee mug glued to the counter with like spilled coffee near it, 8 feet away. If I see, a character off in the distance, I'll slow down. So hopefully they reset. So so I get to appreciate that in full, and I'm looking around. Whereas I know, there's probably people behind me who are going through with their eyes closed and saying, I just need to get from beginning to end, and they want no part in it. How do you then get them to be part of that story, even if they, have no intention of appreciating it?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize the nature of immersive theater. I'm going to call it that, immersive entertainment. Everyone's going to experience it on their own level. If you've got a really detailed, phenomenal story that has all these little Easter eggs hidden throughout it, that's going to be appreciated by a certain level of people. If it's got a bunch of people that just go out and go boo, that's going to be appreciated by another level of people. And I had a boss, the vice president of entertainment after Elaine College, her name was Nancy Hudson. She would say, Scott, I don't like your haunted houses. They scare me. And I walk through them with my head buried in my husband's back, and all I see is the floor. And I said, so that means I need to make the floor scary? And she said, that's exactly right. So you have to recognize who your audiences are. And I don't say audience because there's not just one. There's going to be a variety of people who will experience things on different levels. The other thing that I think people have to recognize is, just because I believe there needs to be a story with every attraction, that doesn't mean that story needs to be told in full to every single guest who experiences it. In fact, I think the story helps the internal team, and certainly the internal creative team, make decisions and expansion without creating something that is completely off-brand and out in left field. It's one of those things that I don't know whether anybody gets every single nuance or every single detail of every single story that takes place in the attractions industry. What I do think is, when you've got that sort of, for lack of a better description, show Bible, and you realize, gosh, we've got X amount of capital and we want to do some sort of expansion, you don't put a clown in the middle of a dungeon if you're building a haunted attraction. You have that story to kind of guide you, point you in the right direction. Everybody thinks that a story is something that is a hindrance. It's not. It's a phenomenal support for the creative process. It helps guide you. I always say, use the story like a jungle gym. You build the jungle gym, which gives you all of these great places to play, and then you can swing through it any way you want to. So it's not a hindrance, it's a tool. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's important that every single frontline employee, even, or guest who visits, understands every detail of the story. I think it is important to have a story so that if they want to know more, they can continue to delve into it.
That's really interesting, because then the story, for lack of a better term, is more valuable to the internal team than it is to the external, to the guest, right?
Well, I think it serves both purposes.
Yeah.
I think it serves because there are those people, and we all know them. I refer to them as the sneezers. They are quite often referred to as the fan people, you know, the fanboys, the fangirls when it comes to the attractions industry. But I call them sneezers because they are able to spread the virus of the project that I'm working on. And they're the ones who want all those minutia details. They're the ones who want to go, oh, and the story is this because I saw this coffee cup spilled over, but the coffee cup happened to be from the gas station, which was owned by the father's uncle in the store. I mean, they love that kind of stuff. And that works to your advantage. It becomes marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And there are but you can't just do it for them. You have to do it for every level of your guest that comes through. You have to make the floor scary. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Because you were kind of getting to where I was going with that. But the other part of this that makes me think that too is I work with a lot of leaders and, you know, how they interact with their employees. And so having them understand the story, I think, is one part of it. But there's also this other thing that's been, you know, kind of whirling through my brain about employers using story to better interact with their team, not just the story of the attraction, but the story of the company, the story of the employee. Do you do any work in that area? Do you see the crossover there?
Well, I absolutely see the crossover there. And it's why in many of the larger theme parks, they actually incorporate the entertainment staff to do the orientation, because that helps, you know, people who are actors, well, people in general are natural storytellers. If you're a better communicator, you can share those stories with other people. I've done everything from workshops. I used to teach a seminar called what was it called? I don't even remember what it was called. But anyway, it was about making a good first impression. And it's been called several things, but it was about making a good first impression and basically saying you've got 7 seconds to tell your story. And that happens with your eye contact, your body language, your facial expressions, and your immediate interaction with people, because that's how long it takes for people to decide whether they like you. So yes, to apply those things. I've also done seminars on improvisation for business students. I've taught workshops at the MUMA School of Business to undergrads, as well as the graduate school there, to help people who aren't involved in the entertainment industry at all, just corporate executives, to help them understand, look, if you're going to do a PowerPoint, you better have a storyline, because if you're just putting up slides, people are going to doze off. Mm-hmm. The goal is not to put the information in front of people. The goal is to make it so that they remember it. And by using a story, by engaging people, you know, the simplest thing in the world, I always tell every speaker I deal with, tell a short personal anecdote at the beginning, because it makes you engaging and it makes people's brains shift into learning mode so they will pay attention to what you're saying later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the phrases I've seen you use, and it's on your website as well, and that's the term, the creative North Star. Can you tell us, you know, what that means and how that, I would say, helps keep the story as that guide rail for developing any type of content?
So I kind of use my theater training in regards when it comes to the creative North Star. My view on directing, because I still, you know, quite often I don't just write and produce. I also will actually direct and work with the performers and the technicians and the designers. My way of directing is, let me show you what success looks like. Put the right people in the right jobs and get the heck out of the way. Let them do what they need to do. Nudge them if they need to get back in line. The creative North Star, as I see it, is here's our goal. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And that does not mean I'm trying to accomplish a really successful attraction, because that's unattainable. That's not actionable. What I mean by North Star is I want people to walk out of here feeling X, and so much so that they want to tell everybody they know. Or I want people to walk out of here and have to buy that magic wand. Guess who I'm referring to? They have to buy that magic wand. I've done it. It's what is the action that you want, and use that as your North Star. And you kind of back up from there, so that you make sure that everything you do contributes to that ultimate goal. There's in the world of storytelling, I was working with an education department at an aquarium, and I see one of the staff who's sitting there in front of their computer memorizing facts about alligators. And I was like, okay, what are you doing? And they said, oh, I'm getting ready for my presentation on alligators. And I said, okay, what's your next step? And they said, well, I'm going to go out and do my presentation about alligators. And I said, no, wait a minute. There's a step between there. And they're like, what do you mean? You have to memorize the information, but you have to say it out loud at least once. You have to rehearse it. Well, why? Well, I said, so what is your ultimate goal? I said, well, my ultimate goal is that I want people to learn about alligators. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you just send them this PowerPoint? Just let them do it. Let them look at it. No, but I mean, I want them to understand that if you interact with alligators and feed them, it's actually detrimental for them. And I said, now you're telling a story. Now you're engaging. That's why you have to say it out loud. So I think it's really important to recognize what is the North Star, and it's not opening night. That's not the North Star. The North Star is, what does the audience do after opening night? And that, as you take that backwards, that helps guide you along the way.
So do you have a North Star in your stories? Like, is that the end of the story and then you build toward that?
I think the stories are built based on the North Star.
Okay.
So like if I'm trying to think of a project that's more recent. I think like with, I know one that I've done not too long ago. I did a haunted attraction back at Busch Gardens. It was the very first, it's been many years ago now, but it was the very first theme park attraction that guests went through by themselves. Theme park haunted attraction. Alone. Exactly.
Yes, loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. I was very proud of that. That was, I tell you, that took 5 years to convince the upper management that we needed to do that. But the North Star with Alone was to get people to recognize the Howl of Scream event is still scary. That was the North Star, ultimately. Okay. It was, we wanted to convince the people that the bloom was not off the rose and that this event was still valid. And so then going, in my mind, going backwards, I said, well, what is the scariest thing we could do? Well, the scariest thing you can do is put somebody by themselves. That was, at least at the time, that's what we felt it was. And still stay within all of the theme park rules. So was to put them by themselves. So then I created a story that would allow us to accomplish the goal of putting somebody by themselves, to hit the North Star, to let people know that we are still viable, we are still scary, we're still doing things that nobody else is doing. And so the North Star and the story, I think, are very much related, but they don't necessarily fit together in a narrative. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The North Star is the reaction you want. The story is the tool you use to get you there.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah. And on the note of the Alone House, if I recall correctly, it was like $40 and you had an option to take a group or to like be in a group of 4 if you wanted. So it could be like you and your group. So I was there with my buddy Bill, and we each were like, all right, we're each paying $40 and going through Alone. And best $40 I ever spent. So,
well, thank you very much.
Yeah. And I remember just that fear of being like, oh crap. Like I don't have a conga line as a buffer to support me on the front and the back, and someone's chasing me with the chainsaw. That was distinctly.
And you don't have the option of laughing at somebody else getting scared.
Right.
You are intimidated. You are, one of the things that is scariest, I think, even more so than being alone, is recognizing you're no longer in control. And when you're by yourself, the actors completely controlled the flow of Alone. They learned through, I mean, I'm sure there's technological ways to do it now, but we didn't have them back then. So they learned how to recognize and hear which room the guest ahead of them was in and what was happening 2 rooms back, so that they could adjust the flow so guests never ran into each other.
Right.
There were doors that shut. You know, having a door shut in front of you in a haunted attraction when you're in there with somebody who's wretched and terrifying is wretched and terrifying. You know, you don't have the option to leave. It's interesting because of all the things that we did it alone, and the things, you know, a lot of people talk about the extending hallway was very popular. We did sort of I call it the Alfred Hitchcock cinematic moment of like zooming in and the hallway backing out, and we were able to do that in person with an extending hallway and a moving actor. But
that's when I was being chased by the chainsaw.
That's when you were being, that's exactly right.
My most vivid and terrifying memory. Thank you, Scott, for giving me nightmares for the last decade from that extended.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for paying me $40 to do it.
Like I said,
actually, I didn't see any of that. I just went to the park, but that's okay. But the room that got me, because I am claustrophobic, the room that got me was a series. It was a very simple room. It was a series of slatted walls made of 2x4s. So you could actually see through the entire room. But in that room, we also built sliding doors and walls that would either close you in or allow you or change the pathway. And we had 2 actors in there who would just mess with you. And they would, you know, they knew that I didn't like to be in, so they of course closed me in the tightest space possible, and they were on the outside of these slatted walls reaching through, and I wrote the darn thing. I cast and trained the actors, and I got freaked out by it. So it goes back to what the North Star was for that, which was to let guests know we are still scary, we are still viable, and we are still trying things that are new.
Yeah. So Scott, can we go into the mind of a haunter for a minute? Because
what do you have in mind?
Because I'm honestly fascinated, because part of the time that I got to work at Universal, I supported the entertainment department. So I got to see Halloween Horror Nights from a different side of the fence, if you will, than a lot of people. And certainly I wasn't any part of the creative part of it. But I got to see what went into it. And I'm curious if you can identify what's different in someone that can put together a haunted attraction like that than someone who doesn't have that mindset. Does that make sense? Like what's going on in Scott's mind that you can think about how to scare the crap out of people that most people wouldn't even want to go in there to be scared the crap out of?
So you're asking me if I'm mentally imbalanced? Is that
a little bit?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess it just depends on your approach. You know, my background being in theater, my goal was always to elicit emotion in people. I'm just not particularly picky about what emotion that is. You know, if I can terrify you, great. If I can make you laugh, great. If I can make you cry, fine. I'm okay with that. If I can fill you with a sense of warm fuzziness, that's one of my favorites, actually. So it's just figuring out the buttons you need to push to trigger that emotional response. Now, when it comes to fear, there are people who are far smarter than I am when it comes to, you know, the science behind fear. One of my dearest friends, Margie Kerr, has written a great book on it. Check it out. It's wonderful. And if you ever get a chance to attend her seminars, do it, because she's brilliant and she's super nice and very approachable. But I think if you are interested in eliciting emotion, you can be successful as a haunter. Now, I will say that there are those people who are afraid to admit that they recognize what is terrifying, what is over the top, what is wrong. And I have guardrails too. There are certain things that I won't do in haunted attractions that other haunters will. And every creator has those limits. And, but I don't think that the process is that much different. It's funny though, because I guess that is unusual. I had a costume designer that I'm working with on a project at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, she contacted me and she said, Scott, you can do the darkest, most twisted things and then turn around and do something that makes a 5-year-old just giggle until their toes curl. She says, that's really rare. Now, I don't know whether I see that as rare. I just look at it as applying the same tools to in a different way. You know, if you've got a really, I'm also a painter. So if I can use the same box of paints to create something that will make you laugh or something that will make you cry, it's the same skill set.
Mm-hmm.
It's just applying the tools differently. So I guess for me, the only thing that's different is I think you have to know how to feel the emotion you're trying to bring out in others. And I'm a chicken. I'm a big chicken. So I know what it's like to be scared. And therefore I know how to make other people feel that way.
I think that's really interesting then, because if I understand correctly, the structure for the storytelling process is consistent, and then it's insert emotion that you want for your audience to feel. So the same process of someone that is developing a haunted house could be the same process as a stand-up comedian or an educator or
yes.
a romantic poet, all in the same. And now it's just reconfiguring just the meat of it, but the bones themselves are the same.
Well, it's funny because one of my books is a book called Follow the Story, and it's all about what we're talking about here. It was specifically written for the haunted attraction industry, but I've had several people say, this doesn't just apply to haunted attractions. This applies to any themed attraction you want to talk about. This applies, as you say, this applies to creating educational experiences. One of my clients, I wrote and directed 2 shows for Space Center Houston, and one of them is all about living in space, living in the space station, and the other one is all about things that explode. And I pretty much took the same process in writing those shows to figure out, where do we start? How do I hook you in emotionally by telling a story or giving you some examples? And where do we want to go? And what do I want you to feel when we finish? It's not that much different from doing a haunted attraction.
I would say that's not that much different than doing a presentation, like going back to your story about the alligators, right? Like if you are presenting information to someone, then you want them to be emotionally invested. So there's your point about, tell a story about yourself, bring them into your world so that you can ultimately tell them a story and give them some new information that they'll want to, or they're open to hearing.
And as you polish your skills, you recognize that it's not just that opening quip, that opening story, but it's actually the whole presentation that has a full story arc. And when you get to the most important thing, which in most cases is about 3/4 of the way through, that's when you want to continue to build to that and continue to reinforce it before stating it, and then hit your point, and then give people a little denouement, a little chance to think about how important that point was. So you're absolutely right. It is no different than doing a presentation. When I speak at IAPA or at the haunt conventions or the special events conventions, I try to put together my presentations with that same sort of structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was another thing that that we were curious about too, because you do training and you do these presentations as far as how entertainment skills transfer into the business world and interpersonal communications. So I know we're starting to run a little bit low on time, but curious as far as what you do or your process for communicating those types of skills to people who have no entertainment experience or theater experience, but perhaps they do have to give that big presentation, or they're speaking at a conference and don't want to pull up a PowerPoint of bullet pointed alligator facts and list them off.
Well, it's one of the greatest fears in the United States is fear of public speaking. And I know that because I've done a lot of research into what is scary. But
that would make a great haunted house then.
It's funny. I wish I could figure out a way to make it happen. I don't quite know the logistics. We'd have to do a lot of video mapping, I think, to make that happen. But the idea of it, and learn who these people, like where these people work, who their family. I mean, wouldn't it be crazy if you had to walk in and you all of a sudden saw a projection of your boss and your entire work team, and then you had a script that started to scroll across the top, and each time you missed a word, the floor would vibrate and you'd get shocked. You know, that'd be a great haunt. I just don't know how to make it happen.
And then someone chases you with the chainsaw.
Then someone chases you as the hallway expands. Yeah. But so what was the question? No, sorry, I warned you that I would go down tangents. As far as working with people who are not entertainment based or are not theater based at all, I think the first thing you have to do is overcome that fear, is to let them know, you know what? The audience, the people watching you, are there because they want to hear what you have to say. They're not there to watch. They don't want to see you fail. They want to get information from you. And if there are people who are there who are just there to see you fail, prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, because different things motivate different people. Some people are very competition motivated. So for those kinds of folks, I like to say, those people that you think are out there who aren't interested, get their attention. Those people, and for those people who are motivated by sharing information, you know, I'm one of those people. If I think I got through to at least 5 people in an audience in a live presentation, I walk out of there with an emotional high that has never been matched with much of anything else. Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing I need to do is overcome their fear. The second thing I need to do is demystify what it means to use performance techniques. You know, I've based, for example, when I do my improv classes for corporate teams, there's only 3 rules. There's only 3 rules. Pay attention, listen, be in the moment, you know, plan, but then leave your plans behind and don't worry, don't be filled with anticipation about the future, and say yes and take what you're given and make it better. So only 3 rules. That's it. You don't have to be Robin Williams to understand how improvisation works. So it's breaking it down in terms that people can easily understand and digest, and then giving them the encouragement when they do it right. You know, since I worked with Busch Gardens for so long and I work with so many zoos, I'm a huge proponent of positive reinforcement. So, because it works with humans just as well as it works with any other species of animal. And when you catch somebody doing something right, you let them know, that was really good. That's exactly what I was talking about. That's how you yes and, you know, that's how you pay attention. So it's a question of figuring out what motivates people, demystifying the terms, and making it so they realize there's nothing to be afraid of.
Where do you think that fear of public speaking comes from? Like, is it the exposure? Is it thinking they're going to say the wrong thing?
I think, I honestly, I don't know, because I've never had that fear. You know, I always say I can create the emotions that I felt myself. I can't create, it's hard for me. That's probably why I've never done it as a haunted attraction. It's very difficult for me to create the fear of public speaking, because I've never really had it. But I think part of it is, I think it comes from different places with different people. I think with some people, it's because they're not comfortable being that quote unquote exposed. A great acting teacher by the name of Uta Hagen once said, all actors are naked all the time because you're emotionally exposed. I think it's that fear of exposure that gets some people. I think some people get it because they're afraid that they're going to look foolish. I think some people have that fear because they are very passionate about what they're talking about, and they want to make sure that they do it perfectly so that everybody is just as passionate as they are. Mm-hmm. This is all speculation for me because I really don't know. Next time I see Margie, I'm going to ask her because she'll.
Okay, good.
All right.
That's awesome.
Well, Scott, I know we're starting to run low on time and starting to wind down. So as we start to wrap things up here, if people wanted to learn more about you, if they wanted to find your books or get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
Probably the easiest thing is just go to scottswenson.com. Everything, there's a link to everything there. You can learn more about my books. There's links directly to purchase the books. If you want to join my newsletter, which is growing right now, it's a monthly newsletter. And no, I do not sell your information to anyone. It is just, you will get one email from me a month that has the newsletter in it, which keeps you up to date on the projects that I'm working on, as well as the two podcasts that I'm part of, which is A Scott in the Dark periodic podcast for haunters, and Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, which I co-host with Philip Hernandez from Gantom Lighting. And, it's a great way to keep up on a monthly basis for me to kind of reach out. I'm also very available on social media, especially, I'm old, so especially Facebook. But the easiest place to go is just go to my website, go to scottswenson.com and follow the links, sign up for the newsletter. And on the 13th of every month, you will get a quick little email from me that brings you up to speed with everything I'm doing. Plus, every single newsletter does have members only content. So sometimes that's a video, sometimes it's downloadable. I actually did, over the Halloween season in 2020, I actually did downloadable voiceovers that haunted attractions could use and play in their queue lines to remind guests to keep their masks on. So awesome. I look out for the people who look out for me.
And awesome. You recorded all of those voiceovers?
I did, actually. I recorded and edited them and added music underneath. It's a full production thing.
Yeah. I love that it comes out on the 13th.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. So I have one last question for you. And Scott, I so appreciate all of your time today and that you've told us how we can stay in touch. My question for you is, does Josh have what it takes to be a voiceover artist?
Okay, so Josh, here's your audition. No pressure. Here's your audition. What I want you to do is I want you to introduce this podcast as if you were a 5-year-old.
Oh, damn it. Like the voice of a 5-year-old?
See, now you just felt that moment of, here's what fear of public speaking feels like.
Wow, that was like Mrs.
I totally rug pulled you, didn't I? Yeah.
Like that.
But that's a perfect example. To be honest, yes, he has absolutely everything he needs because he was so afraid to be wrong. But
I really appreciate you.
There you go. There you go. Rock on. No, you have, and in all fairness, you have the ideal timbre for what I call corporate voiceover.
Thank you. Yeah. What about game show hosts like Scott Swenson? Come on down.
Oh, see, there you go. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right.
That's actually more in my realm because I have that overly enthusiastic voiceover voice.
Right.
It's funny because that's another thing that I've done in the past is voiceover, and I always think that I sound goofy, but other people seem to like it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
I'll keep working on it.
I'm going to try and get Josh to do the audio version of my book. That'll be fun.
I'll do it.
Very cool. That's excellent. Yeah, it's funny because for one of my books, I did the audio version of Follow the Story. I actually recorded it myself.
Okay.
And then I decided, I told the publisher, I said, I don't ever want to do that again. It's not fun to do your own book.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny though, Matt, I feel like the challenge that I would have is, and I've read your books and I also know you very well, and I can hear you talking to me when reading your book. So I don't think I'd be able to replicate that or do that, but maybe I'll just do it as a 5-year-old.
Yeah, there you go. That would be awesome. Well, Scott, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for your time today. And for everybody out there listening and watching, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.